Hey internet friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lindsay or LiJo, and today we are going to be talking about trusting your intuition if you are a sensory state. Flex your intuition muscle in a way where you can trust it and it can help you make better decisions that benefit you and your life overall, because otherwise there's no point in doing any of this. So if you'd like to talk to me more about this subject, you can book a video session with me below on my beautiful platform Snug, and let's get started. So I've really been enjoying playing poker as a mechanism, not only for enjoyment, but for my own growth and development of my own psychology. And I realized that not only is it good for growing myself, but I get to study people in such a beautifully controlled environment. It's just the best game ever. But I've been able to observe a lot of people at this point in places of decision making where there's a lot on the line, right? So the whole premise of poker is there's a price to every decision that you make at every point. The better control you have of your own psychology and the better understanding you have of the human mind, the easier these decisions become. But let's get back to what I've observed. So as someone who has intuition as a savior function, I have introverted intuition as a first function. I use that as my edge in a lot of places, whereas extroverted sensing, my fourth function, it's just not my edge, is using the information that's right in front of me to make my best decisions, even though I am getting better at it. And on the flip side, you have a lot of people who play the game, and we'll just use the ESTP as an example, someone who is SE first, TI second, who use their extroverted sensing as the main mechanism of their leverage. And not to talk about poker too much, but this is really relevant in terms of where I'm going with this conversation. But poker is an incomplete information game. Compare it to chess, which is a complete information game. With the game of chess, you have all of the pieces out in front of you. You have an understanding of any of the moves you can make in any given situation. There's no information that is hiding anywhere. You have access to everything right in front of you. Very good from a sensory perspective because all the sensory is right there, right? With poker, it's different because you have some sensory, but there's also some information that is just not there. There's no information. You can't access that information. That's why it's called an incomplete information game. It means you can't fully rely on the sensory to make all of your decisions from an informational standpoint. Now, as someone who has intuition as a savior function, I have a lot of trust in my intuition. It was put in that position in my cognitive format in order to save me in certain situations for me to biologically get by in life, right? And so if I can bypass having to do the sensory, that is what I'm cognitively designed to do. Whereas someone who has extroverted sensing in a first position, let's say, if they can get by with the SE, they don't really have to do the NI. They don't have to trust the NI. What they trust is their first function. And that's the same for all of us. So there's something special in that. What we want to do, though, is bring a greater level of consciousness and balance to our full mind so that we can make better decisions that will make our life infinitely better. And so if all energy carries information and that information is what our intuition tunes into, well, that's a lot of potential and that's a lot of information that you can't get in the sensory. Many times in life, and of course it's easy for me to say, where it's like, if I wanted to in a given moment gather all the sensory needed to make this particular decision, like it wouldn't even be physically possible. So it's like already sensory is kind of out the door in some kinds of decisions and you have to go with your intuition. But do you trust it when it's in your function stack? So here's the good news for all of you who have extroverted sensing or introverted sensing in a high position. You still have intuition. So the same intuition that is in me is in an ESTP. Same exact NI, right? What's different? Well, the level of trust and respect you have for that function and your ability to leverage it. So what does that mean that I see in this microcosm of life, which is the poker table? Well, I see a lot of people put in positions where they have the intuitive information, but they do not respect the intuitive information because they rely too heavily on the sensory. And what results from someone who has a ton of SE and absolutely no trust or respect for their NI? Well, it leads to really poor decision making, not only in poker, but in life, because making the right decision is often a balance of the things that we can see and sense, and also the things that are unable to be sensed. but our intuition has gathered data that exists behind the sensory in order to fill in the gaps to make that decision. And at the poker table, you'll see people consciously making the wrong decisions simply because they lack the real world evidence. People with sensory can get by really far in life with just looking at the facts, gathering the data, and making decisions. But there comes a point in life and at the poker table where you're faced with a decision where it's very evident you don't have the sensory information in front of you. And how do you navigate that? So this is what I'll see happen. It'll be kind of towards the end of a hand. I'll try to make this as non-specific as I can. And a person is facing, let's say, a $500 decision, right? And they'll start to talk out loud. This is you'll hear this a lot, right? And they start to talk through their thought process. Here I am observing the humans in this perfect scientific scenario because everyone's functions, everyone's weakness is really elevated when there's pressure applied, right? So this is great for me. And so this person is talking out where they are, what they're thinking through, and this is what you'll hear. Yeah, I don't know what, I feel like you got me. I feel like I'm beat. But then they start to rationalize why that might not be the case, right? Yeah, I feel like I'm beat, but you know what? I have a really good hand. And they usually do have a really good hand, right? A really good hand. And, why would you do this in this spot if you had this? And that wouldn't really make sense because, then this happened and this was the raise size. So they start to attach sensory, look at sensory. But what's happening is there's no information left in that sensory. The sensory has been tapped out of all the good stuff it has to offer, right? The information you're looking for exists in the intuitive spectrum. So, yeah, I feel like I'm beat. I feel like you just got me, but I have a really good hand. I call. So that's the person saying, I make the decision that even though I think I'm beat, with the sensory available, I've rationed out the fact that I can be good here a good percentage of the time, right? Maybe I do have the best hand. I think I actually can based off what happened. And then they flip their cards over, and sure enough, the person's intuition saying I was beat was correct. And the other person has some crazy hand. They have quad nines. It's like, who gets quads, right? No one gets quads. But people do still get quads, right? So all that to say is the same intuition that lives in me lives in the person that has intuition last. But what the difference is and where the edge comes is, do you have the ability to trust that information that you're getting from the intuitive spectrum? This person had trusted their intuition and the information their intuition was giving them in this situation, which is the only place they had access to that information, right? They could have made the decision that saved them $500, but instead that cost them $500. So parallel this to life. We all come up against situations where the sensory has been tapped out, right? And the INTJs of the world, we're happy when we don't have to deal with it in the first place, right? We're happy to go on intuition land, but we all have to come in contact with sensory, right? We all have to use our intuition. But sometimes you'll get to a place where it's so elevated in terms of your need to use your intuition, you better have some little bit of a muscle able to be flexed in that area. And that's where practice comes in to make your life better overall, because who wouldn't want to have a higher level of consciousness when it relates to decision making? Wouldn't you want to use your whole brain? Wouldn't you want to access the information that's there available to you that you have access to? This person is literally saying, I know that I'm beat. But because they can't trust that intuition, they can't go with the right decision. Once you tap out the sensory, once you've gathered all those pieces, there's nothing left. There's nothing left there. All you're left with is the void of the information that your intuition would be able to provide to you if you were able to trust it. So if you're savior sensory, what can you do? Let's try to stay away from the $500 decisions to start with. Let's go for the low impact decisions. The decisions where you would typically perhaps double check your sensory, or you would go try to gather a little bit more information in the literal world before you went with X decision. In the places where there's a low dollar value associated metaphorically that you can afford to mess up with a little bit, take those opportunities to say, do you know what? I'm just going to trust this intuition. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. What you'll find out is often you're going to be right. And the right thing is only to trust it in the first place, right? That is the hard decision for you to make. And so to kind of leave you guys with this thought, so if you're a savior sensory, how it feels to come into contact with these intuitive based decisions and have to trust that decision is similar to if I were to tell you, hey, there's one of those big blow up things that the fire department uses to save people on the sides of buildings. And if you jump off this building right now, it's going to catch you, right? But you can't see it. I'm going to blindfold you. I'm going to toss you off the side, right? You just got to trust that, like, I'm not crazy and that thing is actually there. That's how the savior sensory person will feel towards these decisions at points, because it feels very elevated in an emotional, a physiological standpoint to say, I have to trust something is there, but I don't know if it's there or not, right? I'm just listening to this crazy girl on the internet, and she's telling me there's a big like air balloon at the bottom of this thing and just like wants me to jump. Like, I don't know if I can do that, right? So reframe that feeling within your body to this one instead. What trusting your intuition is really like is if you're going to a new house and you go into a new room that you've never been in before, and the room is dark, and you reach to the right side of the room to turn the light on, right? To find a light switch. That's really what it feels like to trust your intuition, right? Because a lot of times it's not that big of a scenario. You're not actually jumping off a building. It's not actually $500. They're the small decisions that make up the day. And all it means to trust your intuition is to say, like, you know what? I've never been in this house before. Totally new space. I don't have any sensory. The room is dark. I can't see anything. But I have a good feeling that the light switch should be over here, right? And it's that motion of just trusting that I could probably find it if I reach my arm out. That's what it means to trust your intuition in a small way. Something you already do. So take that, put it in the back of your head, start to find areas where you can trust your intuition more to bring a greater balance to your psychology, your consciousness, and make better decisions that make your life better. That's all I have for you guys today. I'll see you in my next video. Goodbye, internet friends.